Just stop it. The run-of-the-mill, cheesy, humdrum bullshit status quo just tires me out. What fascinates me are the industry disruptors, the superhuman frontiersmen or women who go through hell to achieve their goals. Join me as we meet and learn from those mavericks, rebels, and business leaders that aren't afraid to piss off the establishment in order to make radical change for good. Sponsored by Johto PR, the disruptive anti-PR firm that murders your competition with cinder blocks and cyanide. This is Disruption Interruption. Welcome back, everybody, to Disruption Interruption. I'm your host, KJ, and we're here today to talk to another industry leader that has steered off the lame, tired path of a status quo. All right, let's get into a problem sitting underneath the entire AI revolution: power. Everyone's talking about AI models, automation, chips, how fast this technology is changing business. But behind every AI breakthrough is a physical reality that cannot be ignored. Data centers need electricity, a lot of it. They need cooling, they need grid capacity, they need infrastructure that many regions simply do not have enough of. This is where things break, or will break. Because if AI keeps scaling on top of outdated energy systems, data centers become the villain of the energy story, consuming power, straining local grids, raising emissions, and competing with communities for limited resources. But what if that narrative is incomplete? What if data centers could be the forcing function that accelerates the next generation of clean energy? Grid modernization, cooling technology, geothermal, carbon capture, and sustainable infrastructure. What if? Our guest today is looking at AI from the physical layer up. He invests in the energy and infrastructure technologies that make large-scale compute possible without breaking the grid. He's the managing partner and co-founder of NosTerra venture capital, Joe Helfrich. Yay! Welcome.
Hey, Jay, thanks so much for having me. And wow, what a great introduction. It sounds like you know our space better than I do. I couldn't have.
That's our job. That's our job to take
okay.
things that are really disruptive and complex and make it simple for people to understand. What you're doing is amazing. Before we get into this, I have a ton of questions for you because I'm super interested, and I know our listeners are too. For you, and I know you have two other managing partners and co-founders, but let's just talk about you. Maybe you guys are all similar. Personally, what's driven you towards disruptive innovation in your career?
Yeah, it's a great question, and my two other partners that we're actually very different, which I think is a strength. What we bring collectively to the team. But I think the three of us share, despite our different backgrounds, we share sort of a frustration with status quo and an eye that sees things, glass half empty, and opportunities to sort of optimize and fix kind of in every stage. In particular, I don't know, I guess I feel like I've always been a round peg trying to fit in a square hole. I was an attorney by training after the first part of my career in commercial litigation. That moved too slowly for me. Founded or co-founded after that a series of software SaaS tech companies and legal tech and fintech, with a couple of exits to strategic acquirers, and most recently kind of a private equity acquirer. And after selling that last business, that abiding sort of dissatisfaction and agitation of wanting to sort of achieve something and do something and move the needle and have an impact just sort of didn't go away. And that, combined with a real concern about energy transition and a desire to sort of leverage my investing and operating experience, led me and my partners to ultimately to launching this fund.
I freaking love it. The dissatisfaction with the status quo, the disagreeer, the rebel for the greatest good. I love that. You fit into our disruptors on this podcast. That's not our planet. And I don't know anybody, unless they have their head in the sand, this is just me, that doesn't have a disagreement with what they see going on. And things constantly need to be improved, right? You're either going up or you're going down. There is no flat line that stays flatline forever. Okay, so now we have this proliferation of like AI. We have, people usually talk about software, chips, models. What are they missing about the physical layer underneath it all?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So, we launched this fund. We started building this, a few years ago, before the energy sort of bottleneck of AI was sort of, top of the fold of every newspaper. And we kind of saw this coming. And, we sort of built this on the recognition that if you look back in time, the change in availability and cost of data in the 1990s completely revolutionized the economy at that time and
Hmm.
created compute, cloud compute, ultimately the internet, social media, our
Yeah.
world today. So data transformed the world back then. And we see kind of a unique inflection point, similar inflection point right now where data centers can transform energy. Because of that, the energy demands of AI compute as these data centers are becoming, more and more energy intensive and larger and expanding, the demand is still outstripping capacity, and the current existing energy grid just can't meet that need. And a lot of folks, especially folks who are concerned about climate transition, energy transition, look at that and see, wow, this is going to be a real problem, right? Data centers really could be a challenge to sort of energy innovation. We take a contrary view and think that this is a unique opportunity in a marketplace where you have such tremendous demand across the entire economy and dollars behind that and urgency, that this is actually sort of a generational opportunity to catalyze innovation to solve that energy bottleneck where that would not have and hasn't happened otherwise. Because there's a status quo of, as you sort of alluded to in the intro, an aging energy grid that is very disintegrated and
Yeah.
very inefficient and structurally not designed for the current challenges. And there wasn't a forcing factor before now to sort of drive those innovations.
It's a forcing factor of the data centers, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
What do you think has to change for data centers to stop being seen as energy drains and start being seen as infrastructure accelerators? And mind you, I feel like we're also dealing with the government and bureaucracy and civil, it's like civic governments and so forth, which don't innovate fast. And the innovation that I've ever seen, tell me if I'm wrong, has always been on public-private partnerships, never public alone.
Yep. So you hit the nail on the head. What's fascinating about this moment in time is that this is a challenge that stretches across all sectors of the economy and all sectors of society, really. So there's public policy, there's sort of community, it reaches down and up at the same time. And as with sort of any sort of inflection point in history, the solution is innovation, right? Public policy can't move the needle on its own without mobilizing capitalism behind that. And so we've got a unique opportunity because the challenge is so real and so recognized, and with such demand behind that, we've got a unique opportunity for innovations to sort of move the needle. And specifically, there's a plethora of opportunities when you look at the current state of infrastructure. You don't have to look far to see where things need to be revised, improved in each different segments. We look at energy generation, energy transmission, right? The grid. So, generation, transmission, then storage, energy storage, and then energy use within compute itself. And that can occur within a data center that's on everyone's mind right now, these big, massive, huge data centers, tremendous opportunity for innovation there. But then also moving forward, we're all very used to the stories of these massive centralized data centers that we're all reading about. They're used primarily to date for AI training, which is incredibly compute intensive. Historically, compute has been basically 80% training, 20% inference. Inference is when we actually use the AI agent, mostly right now sort of chatbots, but moving toward agents. That's going to shift to 80-20 inference to training. And the inference might move more toward the edge from these large, massive centralized data centers to smaller data centers that need to be closer to populations.
That's what I've heard. I heard that is what is like going to transpire. We're going to have these large data centers, and then we're going to have this network or this web of smaller data centers that are, I guess, out further from the data center to be able to handle what you're saying is going to be the training or the inference.
So that's going to, so the prevailing belief in the industry is that inference compute will need to be located closer to the end user, and that's really just a function of physics, speed of light latency. So if you and I go on ChatGPT right now and you ask a question, if you're sitting in one end of the country and that inference request hits a data center in Virginia somewhere, and you have to wait a few seconds for a response, That's okay in a chatbot type of environment. As AI moves more into sort of real-time, sort of real-time involvement in our daily lives, we get out of the chatbot stuff is sort of just the first use case. When it gets to machine interaction, that latency, 100 millisecond latency or greater for that long distance travel is not going to be effective. You think about a Tesla driving down the road and something runs out in front of the car. The sensor on that car needs to identify real quickly, is that a child? Do I need to hit the brakes? Yes or no? They're not going to wait for that inference to go across the country. That happens on board on the device itself. Mission
What a great
critical.
analogy. Yeah. I feel like your biggest challenge is the education curve. I mean, just understanding that one tiny point alone. There are probably thousands of those points, but how it relates to society, the communities, the end user of needing Tesla to know what's going on when you're driving a car, right? It seems to be like these are all points of an education curve.
Yeah, so the tension is certainly natural. We understand it and quite frankly agree with a lot of it. To date, there's been this mindset of throwing money, that there's this sense among sort of the large players that there's this massive opportunity and it's a race. Whoever gets there first, and the I think originally was this concept of super intelligence, whatever you think about the sort of value proposition of that, there's been a race to be first. I think that's evolved a little bit, and it's pretty clear now that there isn't going to be sort of one winner. These different models, these different frontier models are jostling, every month and improving, and they're sort of achieving parity, incrementally as they go. And
Mhm.
so the prevailing sort of model was just to throw money at this and just scale by expanding capex and spending more and more money. So that consumes resources, right? So now these data centers, the pushback that we're feeling, the community pushback that we're feeling in various areas of the country is quite naturally a result of that, because these things are becoming more and more resource intensive. The way we see that is that's a fantastic sort of advertisement for our investment thesis, because we take a look at that model and we say, wait a minute, there are different ways that you can solve these challenges by sort of thinking in a more out of the box innovation approach. And we break that down into sort of two sections. There's within the data center itself, or wherever compute is happening, there is still tremendous inefficiency. The typical data center wastes 50% of their power at any one point in time. There's
Wow.
all kinds of, and the cooling and the water use, because they were designed and the sort of architecture was created at a different time when energy was sort of an afterthought. It was always available. So there's tremendous opportunity to optimize at different points within that data center. And then also when you look at the grid, there's tremendous opportunity to generate more energy. There's plenty of energy out there right now also to get that energy to where it needs to be consumed. So the community pushback is really sort of an advertisement for the types of innovations that
I
we're
love I
for
love that
to solve
mindset.
that.
It's so very true, isn't it? Yes. What kinds of so you're investing in companies that are solving this problem in a very different way. Like what kinds of technologies are most exciting to you right now? Like I don't know enough. Is it like cooling or geothermal or microgrids, or is it just carbon capture, or what? Is it something totally different? I have no idea.
So, the short answer is all of the above. And that's part of the challenge. This is such a broad, systemic sort of economy-wide challenge that impacts, every sort of sector of the market, that to address this properly, it's going to be an all of the above solution. So it's not like solar is going to serve this, solve this, or geothermal. What's interesting is the renewable energy could solve all this, but there's some structural problems in place in terms of storage and getting the energy to where it needs to be consumed. People are excited about small nuclear reactors or ultimately fusion. Each of these solutions has different challenges and different opportunities. So what's really going to solve this is a little bit of all of the above, plus the optimization that's going on from that entire value chain. So data centers are really just factories. They're just factories that take energy and convert that into compute. And so if you look at it sort of as a factory and you look at the supply chain of energy and you try to optimize that supply chain and try to make that conversion to compute more efficiently, that's the right sort of mindset to start identifying solutions. But it's across the board. It's cooling. It's all of it.
Wow. So this may be a silly question, but how, and it probably is a simple answer, but how do you evaluate based on what you said, whether a company is truly solving like that infrastructure bottleneck versus just riding the AI hype cycle.
Yeah, so we've got a pretty rigorous investment criteria, sort of a 12-part process that we go through to look at companies to evaluate whether they're sort of investable, according to our thesis. But first among that is, what's the specific market opportunity that this solution is solving, right? What's the pain point? What's the challenge? So for example, we've looked at some technologies that are addressing valid solutions to valid problems within a data center. That's a need, but a lot of times, or often, that's a kind of nice to have. Oh, that would be nice if they could solve that. But it's maybe a 2% lift for the data center, 2% lift in capacity or speed to market or whatever. And with everything that folks who are running data centers are focused on, that's not going to get the attention. We look for these mind-blowing sort of out-of-the-box opportunities where if they can scale this, this is a 50%, 100%. This is a massive inflection point for the data centers that sort of opens up all kinds of opportunities. So that's our sort of first threshold going in, because there's a lot of great technology, a lot of great solutions out there right now, but they're addressing problems that aren't quite as urgent as what is driving the needle.
Wow. Well, yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of solutions out there. What do you see as the biggest opportunity for entrepreneurs that are building in this space right now?
They really break down into, a couple of different sectors. I wouldn't say there's, a single opportunity sort of writ large across the space. There are compelling opportunities in energy generation. There are compelling opportunities in transmission. Storage is a tremendous unlock to the battery technology that is in the marketplace right now just isn't quite where it needs to be in terms of different sort of technical characteristics and long-term storage and discharge properties, so that we could really fully maximize the renewable energy that's available and that's coming online. And then within the data center itself, opportunities for optimization in terms of addressing that 50% wasted energy. So, again, there's not a, sort of single silver bullet. Each one of these, if you can pick up, 20% here, 20% here, 20% here, the thing that really that sort of animates us and motivates us is a really strong abiding belief that this is a unique moment in time when this demand is going to, the spike in innovation that we're seeing is remarkable. And driving these innovations to market, the data centers, we believe, will look back on this within a period of time and say, wow, these weren't this wasn't sort of a development to be afraid of. These aren't the villains of the story. These are actually the heroes. They were the catalyzing force that pulled forward all kinds of technology that reduces the cost of energy for everyone and increases energy supply and resiliency, because it's just absolutely required to maintain this growth of AI adoption.
Yeah. I mean, the companies that do solve this, power, cooling, grid constraints are going to decide how fast AI can scale. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love, it's fine to sort of talk in these abstract levels and it's exciting. But what really drives it home is when you sort of roll up your sleeves and really get involved with the entrepreneurs themselves and talk to
Tell
them.
us about some of them.
As we're a small fund, we're growing, but we've got a small batch of really exciting portfolio companies. One of my favorites, and it really sort of tells the disruption story. One of my favorites is a company in the Boston area that's out of MIT called Provocative Science. I love this story, right? So picture this: the founder, drops out of MIT engineering school. Fast forward, ends up teaching there and is involved in the incubator there, develops carbon capture technology, really, fascinating whiz-bang carbon capture technology, and then realizes sort of the business economics really don't work for carbon capture and is looking for a way to deploy this carbon capture, ends up developing a business model for smaller edge inference data centers, these modular data centers, think the size of a shipping container, that leverages the carbon capture technology in line with the data center cooling to drive, significant efficiencies in the cooling, which by itself is fantastic, right? That's a lot of energy.
By itself is fantastic considering the amount of water or whatever that needs to happen to
Just,
cool. And
just
that's one of the
amazing.
biggest upsets that you find in public opinion today, right now.
Yep.
Wow.
Now, that's not the end of the story. By the way, as a byproduct of this cooling technology, they're generating beverage grade CO2 They take that beverage grade CO2 and sell it to bars and restaurants. It turns out that in the CO2 market, if you go to a local bar, you order a Diet Coke, that CO2 canister, something like
Yeah.
90% of the cost of that CO2 is transmission. They're
You
able
gotta
to
be
sell
kidding.
that competitively and then use that money to fund the data centers, achieving tremendous margins. So it's that crazy out of the box thinking for a company like that that's solving sort of two problems at one time that really gets us excited.
That's so fun.
Yeah,
That's so very fun.
great
Um,
bunch of guys.
yeah, it sounds like they're a bunch of mavericks.
Yeah, yeah. Talk about disruptive.
Yes. And so how did you hear about them? Did they find you? Like, how did you find them? Like, I'm always interested in those stories.
Yeah, and even though it's a big space, sort of the ecosystem within the investment community is tight, and there are a number of sort of generalist venture capital funds that invest in sort of whatever looks good that comes along, that come across opportunities within this space and feel like it's not really their area of specialty. They may not have sort of the technical or relationships that they need to really assess this. So we get brought in very often, almost all of the investments we made, we've been brought in by another investor who's sort of looking at the opportunity and wants to get our view on it from our perspective. And so that's kind of a strategic advantage that we have. And it's great because it helps us sort of build partnerships and build sort of broader distribution out there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what if your, I guess, thesis, business model, fund, whatever is right, right? Like what does data center landscape look like 5 to 10 years from now?
No one knows. I mean, that's
A blank canvas, Joe.
yeah.
You can
Well,
paint
and
on it
that
whatever you want.
but that's really sort of that's the exciting part of all of this, and the hyperscalers are all sort of jockeying for position and different opinions. Google, for example, believes that by controlling the entire stack within their massive data centers, they can optimize at different levels and solve for that latency that we talked about, the 100 millisecond
Yeah.
latency, so that those massive data centers can actually serve inference. It really all comes down to where is compute going to happen to solve inference. There are a lot of schools of thought that say it's all going to happen here. The compute
Mm,
is going to happen on this thing. And NVIDIA did a deal with, I
your
think,
iPhone. Yeah.
it's amazing. So NVIDIA did a deal with, I think it's Nokia. They're dropping, Blackwell servers in cell towers all around the country, moving that compute away from the massive data centers out closer to where the use case is. And with each one of these sort of pivots, it just opens the window for innovation and opportunity. So I don't want to say it's kind of a Wild West world out there,
It is
because
kind of a
this
wild
isn't
west.
prospecting. The demand is there, in contrast to sort of the build out of sort of fiber optics and the internet. There was a lot of sort of field of dreams, build it and they will come. All the infrastructure that's being built right now is being used immediately, and the demand is still outstripping our capacity to build right now. So
Wow.
it's a fascinating time.
Wow. You can always tell when I really like a podcast how many times I say wow. Okay, a couple more questions. And there's so many questions that I have. I'm sure our listeners do too. Let them contact you about them. First of all, what is the purpose? What is you and your managing partners? Like every company has a purpose of like what they truly believe in, your mission. What's NosTerra's mission, purpose for what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing?
Sure. We're each motivated, by our own sort of values and desires that are very much aligned. But as a fund, like any venture fund, we raise money from investors who want to absolutely maximize their return. And what's exciting for us is that at this moment in time, that aligns very much with purpose and mission, meaning I couldn't pick another area for investment, another investment thesis in this current economic opportunity with more upside potential, more potential for outsized gains than investing in AI infrastructure and energy optimization for AI compute. And then it's nice that, oh, by the way, that actually, we feel very strongly, will sort of ultimately catalyze innovation toward clean, abundant, low cost energy for everyone. But we're not an impact fund. We're not sort of leading with that. We're leading with what we think is a generational investment opportunity in a picks and shovel sort of infrastructure approach with, really sort of tremendous opportunities for outsized returns. So, our obligation is to our investors. But our strategy aligns very much with our values.
It's very cool. That's It's refreshing to hear. What do you find is your biggest challenge right now?
The biggest challenge is pace and moving quickly. When you recognize the challenge and you recognize the opportunity, it's so much of a now thing. As a venture capital fund, you're wearing multiple hats all the time, but you're raising money while you're evaluating companies and making investments. You need to sort of orchestrate those two process flows. I've been involved in other businesses where I make the distinction between sort of disruption and innovation. Incremental innovation is great in a lot of areas, and you can sort of take your time and develop and iterate, and that's great. That's not this. This moment in time really demands sort of out of the box, disruptive, sort of revolutionary thinking and innovation. And so, the biggest challenge is we just want it to go faster.
Yeah, yeah, I could totally see that. Okay, so how do people get a hold of you?
So our website, NosTerraCapital.com, and there's contact info on there. We're on LinkedIn, NosTerra Venture Capital, and emails and contact info is there as well.
And people can reach out to you personally on LinkedIn as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Would love to hear from your audience. It represents kind of a broad segment. It's a lot of
it's a broad swath of technologists and people that are wanting to do things for the greater good. Yep. That haven't been done before.
The energy.
I love that about you. What is food for thought that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think food for thought would be for folks to, when they think about this space and they think about what's going on, there's a lot of sort of immediate urgency, and that's understandable. But food for thought, I think, would be to take a step back and try to understand that the innovations that we're championing that are going to come out of this moment in time aren't just going to solve and optimize energy for compute. These are sort of solutions and innovations that are going to resonate more broadly in the marketplace and more broadly across the economy, that are going to make energy more abundant, more resilient, more available, and sort of address deep structural challenges in the way we generate and transmit and use energy. So, this is work that isn't just benefiting one sector. We feel very strongly that this is going to sort of benefit us all, and our children will look back and say, we're so glad that happened, and we love being part of that.
Great. Mic drop moment. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to Disruption Interruption, where we transform lives, change consumer behavior, we alter economics, and data centers do not have to be the villains of the story. Ciao for now.
Thanks, KJ.
Because we live in a highly litigious society, with America being one of the top litigious countries in the world, here's our legal disclaimer. This information is not intended to be a substitute for professional public relations or legal advice. Do not disregard seeking professional, legal, healthcare, or financial advice, or delay seeking professional PR or legal advice because of something you have heard here. Contact an attorney to obtain advice on any particular legal situation or problem. Use of this podcast or our website or any of its social media or email links do not create an agency-client relationship between Johto PR and the user.